this is Caroline. I'm wanting to ask Michael another question, which is how do we align the self with um, the workings of the universe or with life purpose? So, life purpose is like a big kind of overarching thing, maybe probably like a lot of different life purposes, although people talk about one. And um, workings of the universe, just I think in a way, what I'm thinking of when I say that is like more specific examples, like on a day-to-day basis of how to align oneself with the circumstances oneself finds themselves in. Um, this is a question. This is something that Spirit said we need to do. But then when I was writing it up, I realized I'm not really sure exactly how to do it. And so I thought I'd just ask Michael. So, Michael, how do we align ourselves with the workings of the universe? How do we align ourselves? So Michael said the first thing to do is to pray. So the first thing that we do to align ourselves with the workings of the universe is to pray. So he's saying pray without ceasing. So that basically means having open lines of communication with spirit and the higher self, which is the same thing as spirit, is all that is. Oh, he's saying don't forget you're part of the universe. It's not like the universe is outside of you. It's not like it has its own agenda. It's like duh, you're part of the universe. You're part of the workings of the universe. It's not like it's something outside of you superimposing a will or a plan on you. You are part of that. You are engaged in that. You're interactive with that. You are that thing, the universe. So this is like a big, like sort of like a priori issue that we have contemporaneously with the species, that we keep on thinking that stuff is outside of us and separate from us. This is like if you've noticed these conversations with Michael is pretty darn reiterative, where he keeps on saying, you are not separate. That thing is not outside of you. All one. Like it's just over and over again. So the question was like, how do we align ourselves with the workings of the universe? And basically, Michael is saying, remember, you are the universe. You are part of the universe. The universe does not stand outside of you. And so, really, like the question is, how do you align yourself with yourself? Oh, that's hysterical. Okay, so how do we align ourselves with ourselves so we can move forward in a way that's feels easeful and right? So a way that feels easeful is not necessarily and almost never a way that feels easy. A way that feels easeful is a way that feels right. It feels good, it feels proper. It feels like this is what I need to be doing. This is the way I need to be doing it. This is the right time for doing that thing. So aligning ourself with the workings of the universe really means aligning ourself with ourself. So how do we align the self with the self? So Michael is saying there is no two. So Michael is saying it's almost like there's an external observer of the self. And this is almost like a disassociation or a dissection of the self, like he's saying that we need to have a repatriation of the self with the self. So not only have we separated out God from the species, and ourselves from the universe, we've separated ourself from ourself. Like there's something in us that's wanting to like cut and chisel and and create partitions. Why do we keep doing that? I don't get it. Like why are we trying to dissect and separate? Why is that our tendency? Why is that our tendency, Michael? And he's saying, well, because you don't understand, all is one. But why did we? I know that we lost that understanding when we took God out from the mix of what is and put that outside of us. But why do we persist on chopping up ourselves and ourselves from other things? Why do we persist in that? He's like, you guys are crazy. Part of it is just that we're crazy. We're a crazy species. He's like, you guys like to do things the hard way. And that's okay because it's an experiment, because you're teaching us all something in the process. Also, we're like the lab rats. We're the the dopey ones that's teaching everybody else like like the pitfalls of partitioning. He's like, no, don't make fun of yourself like that. I'm serious. Like this is really like you're a blessing for us. You're helping us out because like Michael is saying that the rest of the universe or the cosmos or whatever watching our species is like they can't see the same pitfalls that we're discovering because they haven't done the chopping up, the partitioning of themselves. I just don't understand why we're doing it. Are we doing it because we're trying to help you out? No. He just keeps saying, because you guys are crazy. But why are we crazy? Because he chopped out God. But why did we chop out God? And why do we keep chopping? And so Michael is like, you guys are like a bunch of babies who think that you can do it on your own. Like you don't see your own limitations. He's saying it's just like the developmental stage that we're in. It's the developmental stage that we're in that we don't realize what our own limitations are. So he's kind of jesting with us a little bit by saying that we're crazy. It's like the same craziness that a 2 or 3 year old has. It's that craziness of just being like, I can do this all by myself. I know everything. I remember when my nephew was 3 and I was working in a clinic and he came in one day. He was like, I can do everything here. I know how to do everything except one thing. The one thing I cannot do is press the button to take an x-ray. That was the one thing he did not know. He knew everything else about it. how to do anything in the clinic except press that one button. And I think that's what Michael is saying. That's the kind of craziness that we are. Like we don't really see our own limitations. We don't really understand. It's kind of like an adorable craziness. Like, oh, you guys are so cute. We don't see it as crazy. We're like so serious about it. Like we're just like, oh, this is the issue. I see it clearly. This is the way things are. And he's basically saying, lighten up a little bit. So he's trying to create some levity here so that I'm not all like, oh, how do we get aligned with the workings of the universe? Tell me, professor. He's like, come on, lighten up a little bit. It doesn't have to be so didactic. Like basically that's what he's saying. Like, stop trying to be so didactic. Okay. Yeah. Aligning ourselves with the workings of the universe is the same thing as aligning the self with the self. And we are in a normal developmental stage for the species in which we think we have a different sort of competence than we really have. We're like a toddler who doesn't recognize that they need what type of help they need, or that they do need help. We think that we're more fully elaborated than we are in some ways. And part of this is because we've chopped out that system of knowing. And anytime there's a dissection of the self from the other, or the self from the self, that's actually like a dissection out of knowing, the knowing component of being. And so we've kind of forgotten that capacity because of this disarticulation of the self from the self, the self from the other. And so to align ourselves with the workings of the universe, which is to say, to align ourselves with the self, means a coming home. It means a coming home of the self to the self to the other, and the self to the universe. It's like a remembering. So dismembering means cutting up. Remembering means putting all the members or the pieces back together. And so Michael is using the word remembering in that sense of bringing all the members or the pieces back to the whole. And that's when we have a sense of knowing, when we remember. Yeah. So, how do we remember the self? How do we put back together the pieces of the self to form a whole in which we can have that sense of knowing? How can we reconnect the self with the self? Okay, so there's something here about holographic. So, can you explain more to me about how holographic fits with this? Okay, so what I'm understanding is that this cutting up or disarticulating of the self from the other, the self from the universe, and all that is, this perception was actually like uh, an effort to create um, holography, or I know they say like a holographic image, but I don't know what the word is if it's not an image, if it's a thing like holography, where the part is in the whole and the whole is in the part. And so, and so there was a time when the efforts of the species was to create this holographic it's kind of like an experience, a holographic elaboration. There was a time right at the end of Atlantis. Oh, that's what happened. Yeah. So, what happened was right at the end of Atlantis, there was this attempt to create a holographic endeavor. And the way that it was elaborated was like this cutting up of this disarticulation of the self into all these little pieces. And then each of the little pieces was used kind of like homeopathically to energetically be able to create this holographic experience or engagement. And what he's saying is that that is what kind of like ruined Atlantis. It was like they took everything to the extreme. Like it was too extreme and could not be sustained. But because it was so extreme, there could not be a remembering or a splicing back together. So it was like the experience of this intention to create a holographic experience was not completed. It kind of like short circuited. It didn't actually come to fruition, but also like the things were not put back together the way that they were originally. And that's kind of like why we find ourselves in the situation that we find ourselves in now. As disarticulated, the self from the self, the self from the other, the self from God, the self from the universe, all chopped up into all these little pieces. So now, this was like an unintended experiment that we find ourselves in now. And it's actually run its course. So, in a way, we're like Atlantis. Like we have done this experiment. It's been taken to the nth degree. It cannot be taken any further. We cannot create any more separation from the self, from the other, from God, from the universe than what we're experiencing now. And so the way so now is the time to appreciate a rearticulation, a remembering of the whole. So So it's almost like half of the experiment was done so that we had the disarticulation, but that we did not actually see it come to fruition in the hologram as a whole. And so that's the piece that we need. It's like we need to be put back together again in a new way. We need to be put back together again in a way that where we are whole and complete in ourselves and also whole and complete in the whole of all that is. That's a true holograph. So that we have not lost the self, we have not lost the whole. Both things are equally true simultaneously. Both things exist simultaneously and are equally valid and necessary. And so there is so much emphasis placed on the individual because of that disarticulation. It's a hyper emphasis. And then in some cultures, there's also a hyper emphasis on the tribe or the group to the exclusion of the individual. And so what is really needed right now is that hologram that that Atlantis was trying to elaborate and somehow failed at doing that. I think they failed at doing that because they put too much emphasis on the crystals and not enough emphasis on the divine. That's what took them off course. All right. And so to align ourselves with the workings of the universe, which is the same as the workings of the self, which is the same as the workings as the divine, which is the same as the workings of all others, we need to see ourselves in the hologram simultaneously as an individual, whole and complete in ourselves, and also all one. There is no individual. All one is whole and complete without any individuation at all. We hold both of those things to be equally true, equally valid, simultaneously. And the way that we arrive at that is to pray. And praying means to be still and come into oneness, to have a sense of utter connection with all that is and with the self simultaneously without erasing the self. The self is simultaneously completely present and completely erased. And that is the paradox that we are capable of holding and that we must hold to be holographic and to be completely aligned with the workings of the universe, and to recognize that that equally means to be completely aligned with the workings of the self. All right. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for joining me today. That's information that I'm not really familiar with. So I have to go back and listen to it. Thank you for joining me today.